work session. First item on our agenda is the 2027 budget session number 2, supplies and services and capital projects. Turn it over to staff.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. A couple weeks ago, we started off the budget season with the initial discussion over revenue and what we're forecasting revenue to look like in 2027. Following that discussion, staff got together several times over the last 2 weeks to start looking at expenditures. And so the discussion we're going to have tonight is going to be supplies and services and also capital projects. Supplies and services is often one of those where we have not as much control because it's contract numbers that we're getting from entities outside. We did have several conversations, as I've mentioned, over the last couple of weeks to discuss capital projects as it pertains to our utilities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Finance Director, Curtis Adams, and he will facilitate the rest of this discussion.
Thank you, Cody. Good evening, Mayor, Clark, and Council. I'm excited to be with you again this evening to continue our discussion. This is budget session number 2. As stated, we'll be going over S&S and proposed capital projects. So our agenda tonight consists of a quick recap of what our mill levy and associated property tax revenue will look like going into 2027. Supplies and services, of course, our general fund reserve allocation, what capital projects have been proposed to move forward for 2027, and then, of course, the next steps in the calendar. This is just a quick reminder of our discussion from 2 weeks ago. At our mill levy rate of 3.5 mills, this is simply a 10-year history of what that property tax revenue has looked like and received. So the 10-year average is $862,000. And from 2025 to current year, we did receive a 1.5% increase in total assessed value. So that equated from last year to current year, an increase of $883,000 up to $950,000. And then all indications are leading towards a 2% decrease moving into 2027, which equates to a reduction of property tax revenue of roughly $19,000 going into next year. Moving to supplies and services. So the main takeaway here is that all of the requests that were asked to be submitted both by departments and rolled up divisions is that they were to submit a 0% increase or flat for the current year. And that was based upon current year projections of revenue, which is sitting at about a 5% increase. And so the takeaway from this slide is the consumer price index had an increase of roughly 2.3% in 2025, and then we're trending at about a 2.6% increase in the current year. And so where that plays out is in the contractual costs, specifically in the general fund. And so just a reminder on what some of those costs are that we don't really have control over is NOCO Humane, our Weld County dispatch costs, police tech and services, utilities, IT services, insurance, and Greeley Evans Transit. And so because the requests that were submitted were flat, really what the true impact then is for the city is in line with what the CPI increase is at roughly 2.6% is what we're looking at going into next year. So this particular slide is basically all of the departments that are seated within the general fund, what was approved in the current year budget, which is roughly $6.4 million, and then what was submitted in 2027, which is sitting at 6.6. And so that equates to right in line with the CPI increase of 2.6%. We're sitting at about a 3% increase for our S&S budget due to those contractual increases. So I'll just highlight a couple of them. From an HR perspective, there was a $29,000 increase, and that's associated with increase in insurance premiums, which are housed in that particular department. The other two large ones, community development was slight increases in professional services, so that's combined. But the other two to make note of are streets, $50,000. That is associated with maintenance costs around our traffic signals. And then the $75,000, which is housed in fleet, was what was submitted for fuel increases. So again, predominantly not within our control, and roughly a 3% increase. And so I just want to give credit to all of the divisions and departments that submitted their SNS. They really worked hard to make sure that those submissions were flat. And then this is the exact same figures, but rolled by division. And so you can see general government, community and economic development, public safety, public works, and then culture, parks, and recs. It's the same figures consolidated, 6.4 versus what's been submitted at 6.6 with that $190,000 variance. I wish this was a little bigger, but I'll walk through it at a high level. So these are all of our asset management program requests that were submitted as one-time dollars above SNS. And so what was submitted in total was $1.5 million. And in multiple meetings and thorough vetting by the city manager's office, what we're proposing moving forward is $194,000 in personnel, $437 in the general fund, and $177,000 in enterprise funds. And so the detail of that is 2 water technicians with combined wage and fringe at the 194. And then the non-personnel side consists of a superintendent truck with a 50% share in the stormwater fund. That gross is $85,000. A vehicle lift as part of our fleet program at $65,000. In our parks, we have an irrigation repair truck with a 50% share in the water fund. The gross of that is $90,000. And then finally, in the general fund for our police department, we are proposing to move forward with 2 patrol vehicles at $120,000 per with upfitting, and a new neighborhood services patrol truck at $45,000. And then finally, our enterprise funds, we have the other share, or the 50% share of the irrigation repair truck, as noted above, that the water fund would possess 50% of that cost due to its intended time in the field. And then a 3/4 ton single cab utility ditch truck, the gross cost of $90,000. And then the stormwater drainage fund would house 50% of the superintendent truck, and that comprises the $177,000 in enterprise activity. So I just wanted to discuss what are some of the impacts of flatline budgeting. Well, it is a reduction of discretionary grant funding. It's a lack of increased training and membership subscription opportunities. There are limited office supply costs and printing, continued building maintenance deferral, lack of funding for aging fleet maintenance tools and equipment, and then generally less funding for our major divisions, fleet, parks, facilities, and PD. And then, as we discussed, there are involuntary increases tied to the consumer price index for inflation. This is a quick, we went over this in 2 weeks ago as well. This is a quick snapshot of what our condensed income statement looks like for the general fund. And so what we're anticipating is that we'll have a carry-in fund balance for the general fund at just over $20 million, with proposed revenues at $20,900,000. The supplies and services, proposed personnel, and then we just talked about the general fund capital, roughly $450,000. With transfers in for allocated time and effort, for our enterprise funds, we have the total expenditures of less than our revenue at $20,600,000. So this is a very positive result. I'm anticipating going into next year with a positive net gain in the general fund of $263,000. So the takeaway is that the general fund is self-sustaining moving into 2027, which is an excellent position to be in. And then what we need to be mindful of is I've budgeted a conservative 2% increase in revenue projections moving from 2028 to 2031, a 5% increase to personnel costs per year, and a 2% increase in S&S. And so what that does is you can see the net result is it shows a slight net loss that slowly increases through 2031 because we have a 5% gap. And so what we'll need to be mindful of is to ensure that the revenue obviously drives the entire financial picture. And so we will need to either decrease or apply the same method and flatline S&S and capital to ensure that the general fund remains self-sustaining for the next 4 years. Now we'll quickly touch on the general fund reserves and how that's currently allocated. So the reserve of the general fund manages volatility or market volatility. And volatility describes things that are unpredictable, unstable, and have the potential to change quickly in the market. A product of volatility is risk. And so the general fund reserve helps us manage risk. And so we're continually playing a balancing act of our ability to respond to economic emergencies versus our ability to provide service to the public. And that's what that balancing act of the reserve is always doing. And so what we've identified in the current year is an operating reserve of $7.5 million, or 35% of general fund reserves, in order to account for that potential volatility in the market. And so one of the things we're looking at doing is increasing that back to 40% moving forward, which would essentially add $1 million and take that to $8.5 million of the unrestricted balance, which we saw in the slide before is just over $20 million. So here's a quick snapshot of what I just discussed. So you can see the projected ending fund balance for this year. I'm showing coming in at $20,400,000 for the general fund, with 35% of that earmarked. That equates for roughly $4.2 million for an economic downturn and $3.2 million set aside for development or investment opportunities. That's currently how we have that $7.4 million earmarked in the general fund. So that leaves internally in excess of those reserves roughly $12,700,000 as available unrestricted fund balance. And then finally, we'll move to our proposed capital projects. So everything that was submitted, again, we have vetted through the city manager's office. And so what is on these lists is what's proposed to move forward in the 2027 budget. It doesn't necessarily represent all the submissions. The first is road projects. We've identified 37th Street widening phase 3 and 4. Specific to phase 3 is $1.3 million from 65th to Arrowhead. There is a carry forward balance of that of $600,000 for engineering and roughly $750,000 in early 2027 construction. And then phase 4 is $1 million been proposed from Arrowhead to 47th. A reminder to the council that this particular project is funded by 3 particular funds: the Street Impact Fund, our CIP Streets Fund, and our road tax funds. So it's combined, all 3 funds are participating in the funding of that infrastructure improvement. So this particular widening will require financing. So bond issuance will be required to finish phase 3 and 4 in 2028 and 2029. The widening itself is estimated to cost roughly $25 million. And in a conversation today with Ty and Shantanu, we're estimating roughly 12 to 15 million will be required for bond issuance. And so I'll be working with our municipal advisor on the debt service term and amortization options so that we have available funding for that debt service and to see that completion beginning January of 2028. We have a traffic signal proposed at 23rd Avenue and 42nd Street for $375,000. Annual street maintenance, which is funded and housed in the road tax fund, for $2 million, and that's annual. And then we have 3 additional major maintenance streets projects. One is 49th Street reconstruction at $1.2 million. 37th Street Lights Project at $1 million, and 47th Avenue Lights Project also at $1 million. And then the final 4 lesser projects is a pedestrian mobility plan at $150,000, our annual signage and markings at $50,000, our annual ADA ramp replacement at $75,000, and then of course our annual concrete replacement also at $75,000. So those are all of the streets projects that we have deemed are necessary to move forward into 2027. Other projects include obviously the conclusion of our wonderful new PD facility, the annual debt service, this is just a reminder, which is housed in the food tax fund, is roughly $1.7 million annually. And then we've budgeted $400,000 as an initial placeholder for the operating and maintenance costs of that facility, also housed in the food tax fund. They do anticipate a budgetary underspend for construction costs, but we're currently evaluating the future usage of those funds with our upcoming community complex renovations. The fund balance in the food tax fund will continue to increase annually for police station maintenance and future city projects. Our conservation trust fund has proposed $360,000 in annual improvements to park structures and furnishings, and a reminder that the revenue source for the conservation trust fund is state lottery proceeds. And then finally, we have our Park Impact Fund. $600,000 has been proposed for City Park Playground expansion. And now we'll move to our enterprise capital needs. Specific to the water fund, $5.4 million was submitted for 2027 water projects, and we've deemed necessary $2.2 million to move forward in the adoption process. $25,000 has been earmarked for engineering specs and municipal code updates. $1 million for Ridge Pond pump station construction. $40,000 for lead and copper inventory. $600,000 for Neville's Crossing pump station and pond. $60,000 for headgate repairs and automation. $150,000 for a water master plan. $100,000 for Boyd Water Treatment Plant partnership evaluation. $100,000 for missing fire hydrant valves. $60,000 for a water efficiency and drought management plan. $65,000 for Evans Ditch overhead crossing inspection. And if we were to move forward with all 2.2 million of those, obviously off your discretion, we would have an approximate $10.8 million as our year-end fund balance moving into 2028. The wastewater fund, we're proposing that $4.8 million move forward for adoption. $1 million has been deemed necessary, specific to our wastewater treatment plant engineering design. We're looking at 35 to 50 million in plant upgrades, and financing will be required for that. We're currently working with our consultants on the scale and timing of that. It was originally thought that construction would begin in 2027, but given the regulatory uncertainty, we're looking at a 2028 start of construction for those infrastructure enhancements. $2 million has been earmarked for State Street sanitary sewer line replacement. $600,000 for a closed circuit television van, which provides visual assessment of sewer lines. $650,000 for annual plant structure and equipment replacement. And our annual solids handling and dewatering is $350,000. $25,000 for engineering specs and municipal code updates. Bless you. $100,000 for our sewer line relocation and upsizing related to 37th Street widening phase 3. $100,000 for our annual sewer line maintenance. And should all of those move forward, it leaves an approximate $18 million fund balance moving into the beginning of 2028, should those be adopted for next year. And finally, we have our stormwater drainage fund. $5.2 million is being proposed to move forward in the budget process. The primary is $4.8 million for 23rd Avenue drainage outfall project. This is a construction carryover from the current year, which is funded via the state revolving fund loan, which was originally issued in 2021. $100,000 for annual curb and gutter inlet outlet rehabilitation. $100,000 for storm line jetting and pond cleanout. $150,000 for a stormwater master plan update. Same as the others, $20,000 in engineering specs and municipal code updates. $20,000 for our drainage infrastructure associated with 37th Street Phase 3 widening. And $25,000, which is a shared cost for the implementation of our asset management software. So should all of those projects move forward to adoption, we would have roughly a $1.6 million year-end fund balance at the end of 2027. So that concludes the capital. I understand that it's very detail heavy. We're obviously happy to have all our operational staff here to answer any questions surrounding the capital. I think the S&S is pretty straightforward because all the submissions were flat, but happy to answer any questions that you might have. But a quick recap of the timeline. So our next meeting will have a comp and class results study from our consultant that's currently working with Julie in HR. September 1st will be an overview of our enterprise funds. September 15th will be an overall budget review. And that should say 2027, so that's a typo. And then October 6th would be the first reading of the budget, and October 20th would be the second. And so with that, we are here to happily answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Curtis. Great presentation and everything like that. So I actually have a few questions for you. So going back to the general fund major contractual cost, one of the things that I'm kind of was looking at is the NOCO humane. I understand that there could be a way, a possibility of the way that they charge us that could significantly increase. Do we know what the timeline is on that and what that increase can be? And if so, is there a way to avoid that? Because I'm sure that's going to have a major impact.
Absolutely. I will definitely defer to the city manager for that, sir.
So for the last couple of years, dating back to 2023, we've had a late 2023 into 2024. We've been charged as a cost per capita. I believe the first contract we had with NOCO Humane was $8 per capita at about 23,000, roughly 23,000 residents. And then that has increased to $8.80 per capita for animal services. And so right now we're right at the 200,000 mark, maybe a little bit over 207,000, which I certainly have deep concerns about that much money on an annual basis for animal services. It's something that Chief and I have had a few conversations on. I'm actually having conversations right now with NOCO Humane about these costs, because I do have concerns about the sustainability of $200,000 per year, because I do not think it is reflective of the business that we're actually taking to NOCO Humane. I do think that right now, moving forward, we have $200,000 in the budget to cover animal services for 2027. It would be my recommendation to hold that, so we have the money to hold it at that level while I'm still working through negotiations with NOCO, because I do not anticipate that that'll be done by the time the budget's ready for adoption. But I'm actively working on that right now.
Awesome, thank you. All right, my next question is regarding the old Greeley-Evans, the old now Gallup. Do we see any increase that the city may have to contribute to that now that it's expanded its service area?
I would defer to anyone operational that can speak.
I have not received any notifications of an update.
Okay.
Or of a cost increase.
We're meeting with them in 2 weeks.
So it sounds like we're going to meet with City of Greeley in 2 weeks to discuss that, the Gallup system. It's been held at $258,000 the last couple of years. I have not received any notification from the City of Greeley of what any cost increase will look like, but we'll definitely keep the council informed following those discussions in 2 weeks and adjust the budget accordingly.
All right, great. My other question is regarding the council, the fund for the council. It's about $81,000. Can you just kind of give like a high level overview of like what exactly that $81,600 entails? And could that be cut and maybe utilized elsewhere?
That's 11.5 per
That's
council member.
exactly.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
So the detail of that particular department, I can probably be most thorough with an explanation. If it's acceptable tomorrow, I can dial into the general ledger specifically, and I could send Cody a follow-up email on specifically what that's comprised of. I don't have that off the cuff at the moment, but I can generate it very quickly.
Okay, sounds good.
That will give you some.
That's
some
exactly what I was
revenue,
thinking.
because
Absolutely.
it shouldn't be that,
Right.
and we haven't used it.
Absolutely. That'll be a quick turnaround for me.
Well, I think some of that's going to be council pay, and then I'm wanting to say some of that is CML memberships as well, but I'd have to take a look at that for sure.
Yeah.
Generally, memberships of that nature would come from that line item. So I'm thinking that's probably outside of the pay. That's going to be one of the bigger ones, is the city's CML membership.
Because that's roughly like around 2,000, give or take. So just based off that, it's because it's 11,500. It's 500 per council member.
Right.
So it's like
Well,
a
we
little
can-
over. But yeah,
I
like
got
you
it.
mentioned, yeah.
More. And going back to the budgets there regarding the reserves. Currently, we're sitting at about 35% that we're putting it in. Maybe have some discussions, maybe going forward, maybe raising it from 35 back up to 40 and everything in case of any sudden economic downturn that could possibly come in the near future, just maybe for discussion to later. And going back to the water fund there was about $5.something million in projects that were proposed. And we're only doing about 2.2, I believe it was.
Yes.
It looks like that fund's going to have a pretty healthy year end of about 10.8 million. Wouldn't it be wise, based on a lot of the infrastructure needs and issues that we've been having you know, that maybe we put a little bit more, spend a little bit money in those areas to help.
Absolutely. Yeah. What we can do is I can absolutely have a follow-up conversation with Cody to see prioritization if there's more of the 5.4 million that's higher on that prioritization list to put through with the others.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with all the deferred maintenances we've had over the years and years and how it just keeps piling up.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should look at maybe spending some money to
Additional
help offset
funds.
that. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, my time was up. Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, of course.
So I have a follow-up for your last question. If we do the 5.4 versus the 2.2, does that put more stress or more work on our engineering team? Like, would that overfill their plate? Just
Absolutely.
something that you guys may want to look at and let us know when we do talk about it. Because I agree, we do need to get some of these projects rolling because the deferred maintenance, that's, we can't do that anymore. But I also don't want to burn out a team when they have so many projects already.
Yeah, so if you recall, last week I sent City Council an update on all of our capital projects that we have in work. We have a lot of work that's being undertaken by the engineering team right now. There was also several things that were removed from the water fund pending the outcome of a water master plan. So we know that we have, as we work to incorporate a capital improvement program, so we know that we have a prioritized list of improvements that need to be completed, so we can also plan for that. So that's some of what the reductions were, to make sure that we weren't presenting a budget that was completely out of balance, but then also making sure that we had, through the water master plan, justification and prioritization for moving forward with some of these projects. But if it's the council's interest, we can certainly reconsider projects for the water fund.
Well, like I said, for me, I just don't want to overwhelm, a great team, and I don't want to burn them out either.
Yeah, so you'll see tonight on the consent agenda, I've got 4 on-call contracts for council's consideration from a variety of engineering companies, and that is to provide supplemental engineering resources to the team as they work through several of these projects. Tonight, we're not spending any money on these on-call contracts, but it is just reflective of the work that this team is doing. I think we're in a very good position staffing-wise as compared to years past right now. So Ty has recently received his professional engineer's designation through the state of Colorado. Shantanu is a professional engineer. Shantanu, we have 4 or 5 professional engineers in the engineering team right now? And then we've got an opening that we're bringing on. So I think the technical capacity of our team is so much stronger than it has been in the past. I'm very pleased with the route that we're going from the perspective of technical expertise. But the team does have several big projects on their plate right now that we're trying to bring home for the governing body.
Thank you for that. My other question is it's near the beginning of the presentation where you discuss the 2 patrol vehicles and the police truck for the general. They were coming from the general fund, it looked like. Why, and this is just a refresher for me, why can't we use the food tax fund for the vehicles? Why are we using general fund?
Chief, do you have any sense on allocation of funding?
Not specifically to that particular fact, but
Okay.
the food tax fund can buy equipment, is my understanding, and we would have to determine what the appropriate use of those funds, because it's not just police equipment, but other statutory provisions that are under that food tax guise. I don't think there's any one fund that would be prohibitive, but it may be something we could look at just to see how it can be balanced a little bit different.
Excuse me, I'm just going to kind of chime in and back on that. So the food tax fund is very restricted. So when we went to to the vote in '02 to release the food tax, it was very specifics to capital projects, parks and recreation, swimming pool, golf course. In '21, we went back to the voters so we could do the police station, but it's for the police operation. So we could probably get legal clarity on what that actually is, if that would be considered operations, but it's more on the capital side of things is what the food tax is currently held for. We're meeting internally and we'll be potentially bringing back a ballot question so we can release some of those funds. In the ordinance in '02, it had a lot broader language in the ordinance, but not in the ballot question. And so within that ordinance, it says that the food tax can be used for economic development incentives. So we could use that pieces along with all of those others, but in the language on the ballot was very different than the ordinance. So we are working with legal counsel and discussing internally with the finance committee and looking at options to see if we can broaden that a bit rather than just being so capital heavy that we can have opportunities to utilize these funds for operations and
Thank you for the
Yeah.
clarification.
So right now, from 2002, the things that are the things that are allowed to use the food tax on capital improvement projects to local parks and recreation facilities, trails and walkways, streets, bridges, and traffic control improvements expanded in 2021 to include financing the cost, designing, constructing, equipping, and maintaining a new city police station. So we have some more discussions that we need to have in the very near future about the food tax to give us a little bit more latitude for some of the goals that we're trying to achieve. Since I've been here, we have purchased the police cars out of the general fund through that asset management program. So that's why we've got them placed there. Last year, if you recall, we had zero in place for the AMP. Council then directed us to increase that to $500,000, I believe, using a transfer from the ERA to repay the city from the Evans Junction. And so that's what I'm trying to carry forward into 2027 is the methodology that I'm using.
Thank you for that. I just had some citizens question why we couldn't use the food tax, and that's why I needed the clarification. So I'm done. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
So going back on that question, we're going back for clarity and potentially expanding that food tax to a different, like to allow us more, but keeping what we have and just making sure that there's like an addendum to it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So going back to the water fund, I know it was been brought up 3 times already. Sorry again. I did see. I know we have some of the pumps already, but granted, I don't know if this was created prior to North Point pump. So I don't know if that's going to be a part
In the middle of.
Or the middle of. Yes. So it's not on the list. So I'm just wondering if we're also considering that with that figure that's up there, because I know that's going to need to be looked at. Granted, I don't know if we can do a fix and then maybe somehow gain some time, but more than likely it'll probably be a part of that, correct?
Yeah, so what I heard this afternoon, so last week I signed a $24,000 emergency sole source for a new VFD and a new PLC to get that in so we can get the North Point pump station back up and running. The update I received this afternoon is we're still waiting on the VFD, which would lead me to believe we've received the PLC. Is that correct? Okay, so we've received the PLC. We're still waiting for the VFD to be delivered, at which time, once we have both of those pieces of equipment, then we can get those installed and get the North Point pump station back online. We have money budgeted in 2026, $600,000 in 2026 for the Ridge pump station, of which we're using a portion of that for the engineering that we discussed at the last city council meeting. That will give us an engineering solution to the Ridge pump station. That way we can have a work session with city council this fall, once we have the engineering, to understand what is that scope and how do we best go about making those improvements. We have $600,000 in the Neville's Crossing Pump Station and Pond because we have received, or we've been notified that we're receiving, let me clarify, we've been notified from the federal government that we're receiving a $600 CDS, Congressionally Directed Spending Grant, to help offset some of those costs. Now, this, staff did submit CDS requests for both the Ridge Pump Station and also Neville's Crossing Pump Station to get those rehabilitated, trying to take that burden off of the taxpayer as much as possible. We did not get any money for Willowbrook or the Ridge Pump Station, but we did receive that for Neville's Crossing. So that's why we have Neville's Crossing up there with the new PLC and the new VFD for North Point. The hope is that that those pieces of equipment keeps that pump station going while we're trying to get those two rehabilitated, so then we can move over in a near budget with another request, probably another $1 million request, to then get that pump station rehabilitated.
Now,
I'd love to do them all at once. It's just we don't have the resources for it.
I just want to make sure it kind of reflects it, just because that's something that's going to be pending also that we're going to need money for, right? So a question to you though, granted, I don't know exactly what that pump does in its entirety, but clarify to me, do you feel, I know with like the water levels, the tables down and the levels, do you, and especially with the non-pot system, and like I know that there was a smell of algae, is there any kind of like slush or anything coming through that it's affecting our pumping systems that you know of? Because it just seems that like all of a sudden we have these pumps offline when that is happening. And granted, it might just be the smell, but I'm just curious to know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, so the smell is a function of the dry winter, right? And the lower reservoir levels. So as through normal consumption, we've used water this year that's brought that water level down. So the mid and the higher level elevation waters have been used in the reservoirs. Stuff settles to the bottom, right? Sediment settles to the bottom, and so then you have a higher concentration in that water that naturally gets pulled into the system for treatment. Treatment costs go up. It's a challenge, and it's a pretty common challenge. I'm not an engineer, but I would say that probably what is plaguing our system more than our pump stations more than anything would be some power surges that we have on a pretty frequent basis. Power surges and electrical equipment just really don't mix very well together. I think another thing that is really hurting our system is deferred maintenance. We have pumps that are way too old. They're running, there's a lot of demand. It's hot out right now, and those pumps are pulling a lot of water. They're working hard, and so therefore when you have pumps working that hard, they tend to overheat pretty easily, and then that leads to failures with your very critical systems that are not easy to come by, right? These aren't sitting on shelves at your local Ace Hardware. And so I think, I would think between a mix of the power surges, but also just the deferred maintenance on the systems that my team's trying to get in front of, I think that's what's creating the failures more than anything.
And then I have a question regarding the enterprise capital. In regards to the van visual assessment, it's $600,000. It doesn't, obviously, you're not going to add the whole scope of it. But my question is, are we going to utilize that moment for us to map out all the sewer lines within the city on GIS?
I'm sorry, for which one was it?
It's for it's the van visual assessment for the sewer
Oh,
lines.
the CCTV van?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is
$600,000.
Yeah, you actually had that budgeted in 2026 for 450. And between the time we got the quotes for 450 until we went to place the order, it went up 150. There's very few vendors for this, and so that creates a bit of price volatility. Rather than bidding it and coming back to the city council for a budget amendment, we're putting it back in the budget for council's consideration. It is a critical piece of equipment that we do use. Our current van is not reliable. So we were looking at the opportunity to reuse the existing van we have in other divisions. However, the reliability of it would just create ongoing budget issues that we don't want to have. So I would say that, is the CCTV van necessary? Is it a critical piece? Absolutely. So we can maintain the integrity of our pipes. And Ty, if you've got any other additional information that I'm missing on that.
I think the question was about geospatial mapping. Our sewer system's actually probably the most mapped we have. We've done a pretty good job of tracking all of that. So I think we regularly assess it, but our sewer system GIS is currently up to date. This is just to drop a camera in, look at conditions, find clogs or separations, and then go and repair them.
I was just curious, just because I know in the east side, typically when we have projects, we get surprised. So I was just making sure that if there's any gaps, that we would utilize that moment to like map it. But thank you. Last question. I know I had mentioned, I believe, at a council discussion in regards to potentially having a crosswalk from Riverside to the other side, obviously, crosswalk. Granted, I know it's not in the budget, but I would love to see that. And I don't know from what pot of money that would come out of, but I was just curious to see what the cost would be and to consider that as school's going to start in.
So you're looking at the crosswalk there at Riverside Library across 37th Street?
Correct.
Yes. So that is a discussion that I've had with Ty, and we're looking at combining that with some other turn lane markings and also some other crosswalk markings. Because of the nature of those markings, want to be able to have as many of those that we can bring the vendor out to take care of as much of that at one time. We're just trying to get a little bit further into the year so we know exactly how much money we have to make those improvements. So it's still very much on our radar. We're trying to plan things out here over the next couple of months.
And then typically with crosswalks, the flashing lights come with it, or is it like an optional, like an add-on?
You can have the flashing beacons. And I think one of the things we were looking at last year, if I recall from all the conversations, I believe we were looking at the traffic calming funds to be able to use for the crosswalk and the flashing beacons.
What fund is that you said?
I believe it's the traffic calming.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Crabtree.
Good evening. From a high level, what happened in 2018 to 2019? Why did property taxes jump so much in our benefit? Was it a restructure with Weld County? I don't remember that happening, but we essentially gained $500,000. I'm just kind of curious how that big jump took place.
I'll definitely make note of it and provide that in a response as to the discrepancy.
What is a vehicle lift? I know what a Toyota truck vehicle lift is, but why are we spending $65,000 on a vehicle lift?
To lift vehicles.
Oh, that vehicle lift. Perfect.
So it's for the
The whole time I'm thinking, why do we need to lift a vehicle? Oh, that vehicle kind of lift.
That's all we
Thank you.
need. And we're done.
So
Thank
it's
you,
for
thank
the fleet maintenance division.
Oh, that
So-
makes far more sense. No more. We're good.
You don't want a mascot truck?
I could not figure out why in the world we're lifting vehicles, but I think it would be good to change oil with. And then the traffic signal on 23rd and 42nd for 375. How important is that? That would be the only traffic signal on there between 35th Ave and the highway.
Yeah, so you have the city council has allocated $525,000 in 2026 for the design of that traffic signal, and so that's what we're putting the scope of that together for right now. And so I would expect 375. That would be the carryover into 2027 for the design, and so we have it on here because it has been prioritized in the past.
Well, we're saving money, so I'm going to question that one. I don't know if we really need it at this point, but
I don't know that we're necessarily saving money. I think between the 525 that we have planned for this year, once the scope of work gets out there, we get an engineer on board and they start working, I would expect we're probably, based on that number, planning to spend $150,000 this year on design, rolling the remainder of that 375 into 2027 to finish the design. So I think it's going to stay that 525. It's just a matter of when are those expenditures recognized.
And then the same question with the Boyd Water Partnership. How is that developing that we are starting to invest money into actually looking at that project?
I believe that is a project that the city of Greeley has actually come to us on, asking if we wanted to be a partner, not just us, but some other communities. I think that plays well into the water master plan to understand what are the future water sources we have available to us. And so for a nominal investment now to do a study to figure out, does this make sense for Evans moving 5, 10, 20 plus years into the future? That's the intent behind that.
And of course, jumping on the CCTV van for 600,000. How much do we currently spend, and is it contracted, or do we have a little van right now that we're using? This is just a replacement. Thank you. Cool. And then when you speak with Get in 2 weeks and how it's now some other name, I'd be kind of curious why they didn't invite our partners to the table for this meeting. Not the one that we're having in 2 weeks, but this whole change. And they've cut a lot of items, a lot of routes out of the Evans area. So I feel like we should pay less, but I'm kind of curious. We weren't even invited to the table, and we're supposed to be the Evans Greeley Transport. I'd like to know in that meeting where that communication failed.
Yeah, so once we have that meeting here in a couple of weeks, then during a city manager update, we'll definitely have, or during a budget work session, we'll have more information to share with you on that.
Cool. Thanks for all my questions.
Can I also add to that? I know the reason why they changed it to Gallup was because they're expanding their reach.
No, I understand that too, but it was an inner
Oh,
office.
no, I was totally off what you're saying. So considering that they removed certain parts of Evans, I'm curious because they're expanding west more. So that should technically be beneficial to us because they're going into Milliken and other kind of areas as well. And so it'd be just something to ask them, just to find out and see. And then also, I agree, if we're going to pay less, if we're going to receive less service, we shouldn't pay more for something we're not utilizing as much. And not only that, also consider what other options we have in areas that.
So we're kind of getting off topic of this, and we have another item. So we can pose those questions maybe on a sidebar for what they can ask when they go to that meeting with Gallup. But for this discussion, let's kind of keep it to the budget stuff. So.
Well, it would be kind of at the budget. And the
Right, I
reason
know,
why,
but let them ask those questions and they can bring it back to us.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm stating just, hey, just something to consider as you go and speak to them. It is on the list of supplies and services, so it is important to the budget to bring that up, and also things to consider for them in the event that, especially since they're expanding west.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be happy to share more information once we have it, and then kind of go from there.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll
All
have it
right,
right
seeing no other questions or comments, again, Kurt, Curtis, thank you very much for the.
I got a comment. I was waiting for Chris to go, but anyway, back to the funding for the council. Does that 81,000 happen to include that 21,000 that we had for a discretionary fund that I thought we were doing away with?
No, I believe that 21,000 was eliminated in 2026, so we're not doing that. We did not do any grants this year with any of that.
So that amount doesn't make much sense to me at all.
And I'll get a full accounting of what that 81,000 is, and we'll get it to the council.
Okay.
But I know for a fact we didn't do any grants or any of the council discretionary funding.
Well, I just wondered if it'd been left in there, in there somehow to
But also,
get.
It may have been left in there. We'll take a look.
but also to consider in 2024, there was an increase in pay, which will, 5 council members will go up this year.
All right, okay, thanks, I appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much for all of your work and everything into the budget and everything, so we appreciate it. All right, next item is our automated vehicle identification system corridor identification. We'll hear from staff.
As the chief's getting his presentation ready, a couple weeks ago, we had the first reading of the ordinance to create the AVIS system. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have second reading of that ordinance. Tonight, what chief's going to present to you is information pertaining to the first four corridors that he's proposing. This will be 37th, 42nd, 35th, and then 11th Avenue as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief for his presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Randy Darlin, Chief of Police. So we've talked about this on multiple occasions, but what we're going to do tonight is just kind of run through, for full transparency for the public, right? Just what are the corridors that we're identifying throughout the city? These are the first four that we'll bring to you. We have some additional ones. We're working with CDOT, to identify the process that they have for us to bring forward application and permitting requirements for Highway 85, Highway 34. And those are critical because they're statutory requirements, right? Whenever it's a CDOT property or CDOT roadway, we've got to collaborate and cooperate with CDOT to get those processes done. The system's not really going to be much different than what you're seeing with our own main roads. It's just that CDOT has a permitting and an application process, and we're working to get all of those filed through. And rather than bring them to you prior to CDOT's approval, I figured we'd get CDOT's approval, and then I'll bring them to you specifically for those two highways. And then we have a few other highways that I'm still working on, or roadways within the city that I'm still working on. So we're giving you that insight, giving you the identification of the automated vehicle corridors, and we're going to move through the process. We're working on adopting the ordinance. You'll see the second reading of that tonight. The signage, we're working with Census Gatso to identify the locations of all of the signage that's necessary in the roadway. We're identifying not only the locations, but throughout the corridors to make sure the signage is appropriate, clear, and prevalent in all of the areas. Primarily, the area I'm most concerned about is primarily 37th Street, just because the corridor really is pretty much boundary to boundary, right? Not quite, but it's close to boundary to boundary. It's a long corridor. You could get on and off 37th Street at multiple different locations and come into a corridor without knowing about it unless we sign it properly. So we're working on those specific issues with regard to that. Notification and coordination with Department of Transportation, we're working on that with Highway 34 and then on Highway 85. And that's a process that I kind of explained, just running through permitting and application process. But what you'll see in the end are the same type of reports that I've provided for you here, right? Just specific to each one of the corridors. The legal requirements, again, the public announcement, the municipality must publicly announce 30 days before use. We're going to do 35. We may even do more, but right now we're going to do at least 35. That warning period, again, that 35-day warning period, designated automatic vehicle identification corridors. Right now we're going to identify these four. They'll come to you for actual vote on the meeting on the 18th. Reports and citations of revenue, that's an annual requirement under the statute. We'll put that on our website. It'll be a full-time website that's dedicated to AVIS, and that process will be ongoing and continuous throughout the year. And then the prohibited areas, which for us it's not really relevant because it's specifically interstate highways and we don't have one running through our jurisdiction.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Corridor locations. We have our both directions of travel, east and west. We have two corridors in front of you today. 37th Street between 65th Avenue and Highway 85, and Prairie View Drive, 42nd Street from 35th Avenue to Highway 85. When we look at our our north-south corridors, we have two corridors in front of you today, 11th Avenue between 37th Street and Highway 34, and 35th Avenue from the north municipal boundary down to 49th Street. So as we look at these corridors, I can show you the maps of each one of these. The 37th Street corridor, like I said before, pretty much runs the entire balance of our city. There's some roadway east of 85 and some roadway west of 65th that don't really become part of this corridor, at least at this time, primarily just because the traffic flow, traffic volume, and the speeds aren't really very much of a concern in those specific areas of that corridor, of that roadway, right? 42nd Street, Prairie View Drive corridor, that runs from 35th Street out to 85. We have a significant volume of traffic. It's a main artery east and west outside of 37th Street. And then when you look at 11th Avenue, north and south, a main area, we've got school crossings on that roadway. We've got both commercial and residential property in and around entrances and exits onto that roadway. And our final corridor being, I don't know what happened here. I don't know why we're getting, let me jump through this way because it's much easier to see when you're not looking at a, and our final corridor, 35th Avenue from the north municipal boundary to 49th Street. And this is broken up into two different maps just for ease of view, right? So it basically runs from the north municipal boundary down to 37th Street and then from 37th Street to 49th Street. And we did look at this as kind of two separate roadways in essence, just because one is a two-lane roadway with turn lanes and kind of a lot of infrastructure, and one of them, reduces from a two-lane roadway to a one-directional roadway in each direction with more agricultural and just open area, right? So we looked at these from both perspectives because when the roadways are different, I really took a lot of time to kind of look at the roadways in segments when it was necessary so that it was reasonable across the entire corridor rather than just looking at it from point A to point B. And the data supports it in each segment when it was necessary and as a whole roadway when it was more traditional. So when you look at these corridor assessments, here's the quantitative data we looked at, and this is required by statute. Now, not everything on this list is required, but traffic accident data is, speed enforcement data is, reckless driving data, community complaint data. Those are all required under the state statute. We took a look at our radar data because we have it, right? We've got that radar trailer. We've had it for many years, and using that data to correlate and to make determination on our speed and our volume, super helpful to what we're doing. Our roadway characteristics, that really is pretty simple. It's just, are there sidewalks? Are there crosswalks? Is there a school? Is it mostly commercial? Is it mostly residential? Is it 2-lane versus 4-lane? Are there turn lanes? Is it a lighted road versus not being a lighted road? So we considered all of these different pieces when we put our evaluations together. Whether or not we go through a school zone, right? There's only a few. There's two zones that are in front of you tonight that have school zones, 11th Avenue and 37th Street in one segment, right? Parks. 37th Street has multiple parks, right? 11th Avenue has parks adjacent, not directly on the roadway, but nearby, right? And then we looked at our traffic volume data that we pulled from our radar studies, and then two of the roadways that you're seeing tonight, 37th Avenue out west at Stampede and 42nd Street just off of 23rd Street, we had actual speed studies done for those two particular locations, mainly based on traffic volume. Right, so we used full-on engineering studies on those two locations, which were also put into the data analytics and are part of those reports that I provided for you on this. And then we used the 5 years of data. I used July 31st, 2021 through June 30th, 2026. We could have gone into July, but just for ease of purpose and to have all of the reports looking at the same 5-year cycle, we used a date range that was reasonable and we could collect pretty reasonably out of our RMS system. So when we looked at that data, these 4 corridors are our primary corridors, right? These are our some of our busiest roadways in the city that are Evans property. Highway 34 and Highway 85 are our busiest corridors, bar none. We're going to have the highest volume of traffic. We have our highest speeds on those roadways. When we have crashes on them, they are generally more significant than when we have crashes on our own internal roadways. Our speeds are higher, our volume's higher, our risk is higher. Each of these corridor assessments supports consideration of supplemental traffic safety interventions, including automated vehicle identification system technology to improve roadway safety. And this is about safety. If you've, and I know you have, you've looked at our ordinance, right? It's about reducing traffic crashes. It's about roadway safety. We put specific language in there to make sure that we're not utilizing the system as a revenue drive, that we're moving it throughout the city to ensure that we're reducing risk throughout our community, not planting one on 85, planting one on Highway 34, but having that availability to move throughout the city. Now, could there be additional data that is concerning when we put a trailer out there and we're reading vehicles on an everyday basis that might solicit or bring us information that says, hey, let's put a fixed system here? Maybe. Right? But that would be for future use, right? Right now, one fixed system at Stampede and 37th, the data supports it. One mobile system to be used throughout the Evans community on all of these corridors. So each one of those corridor assessments were pretty significant, right? I didn't hold back any real information. You've got a lot of data in those systems. I could have given you so much more. I could have given you raw data. I could have given you the radar studies. I thought a 25 to 30 page document on each one of them was enough data, enough correlation, enough rounded information to provide you with everything you would need to really look at these corridors. But it's not just for you, it's for the public. And it's also for us to create the administrative record in the background so that if there's a challenge on these locations or a challenge on this ordinance, we have the administrative record on file so that it can be reviewed and they can look back and say, okay, well, here's what we needed to do and here's what they did, right? The statute doesn't require any specific threshold, right? The Colorado statute just says you've got to use quantitative data. They want you to look at things like traffic crashes, speed enforcement, complaints, reckless driving, that type of quantitative and qualitative data. We've done that. We keep that data. All of that data is part of the administrative record for this process. And as we move forward into next council meeting's agenda, you'll see these reports finalized. I have no plans to make any changes outside of my signature on each one of them to state that I've reviewed them and that they're accurate to the best of our ability. And then it'll be up for a vote in front of council as a resolution at the next council meeting. I really wanted to go this route rather than putting them into the ordinance, because anytime we wanted to change, remove, alter, shorten any of the corridors within the city, we'd have to come back in and make a change to the ordinance, and it's not required under the statute. This is a means by which we pass one ordinance and then we use resolutions to work through the corridor process. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys might have on the plethora of data that I provided for you.
Great. Thank you, Chief, for the great presentation. Councilmember Neal.
Yes, Chief. I have a curiosity question for you. Is there a minimum height that these signs are supposed to be posted at?
Yes, they need to be 6 feet off the ground from the sign, and they can't share a speed limit sign too. So there's a few different statutory provisions that are coming out of the code for that. It's not specifically in the statute for the Avis. It's more on the signage stuff that's in the system. So yes, we're working with our team and our Public Works to make sure that we meet that criteria.
Well, the reason I asked that question, when I went to lunch, Greeley had their car on 11th Avenue, about 15th Street, and they had put the sign photo radar ahead It was about 3.5, 4 foot off the ground onto a pole, and I don't recall what the signage was on the pole above it, but I thought, that's probably not right.
So if it's a temporary sign, it can be ground level on a temporary road sign, but if it's a permanent sign affixed to a post, it needs to be at approximately 6 feet.
Okay, thank you. And about 40 years ago, when I was sitting out in the audience and the council was debating staff's recommendation for a higher speed limit on 11th Avenue after it was 4-laned, one of the ladies on the council was insisting, well, they wanted to set it at 30 because everybody drives at least 5 miles over the speed limit anyway. So back then,
I think our data
that's why
kind of
it's only
supports
30.
that actually a little bit, right? So the data you saw, I think our average speed on 11th Avenue, not our average, but our 85th percentile was above the posted speed limit, so.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
So this question is for the mobile one. I know the permanent one is going to be, you mentioned Stampede. So that has a 35 speed limit, so we don't have to worry about the transitions. The only thing I worry is because it's a question and comment all at the same time, so just forgive me if the mobile unit, will we be placing it like close to a speed limit? Because you know how with everything that we've already seen, there's that transitional like area where it's like ambiguous to people whether it's 35 or if it went up to 45, which one is it? You know, and so I'm not certain in the other areas if there's a transition in speed limits or if it maintains a certain one. I know obviously the school zones will decline, but my question is if we put it like at a 20 where the 25 is and then it's like in the middle and then 35 comes up soon, it's like, where are you? Are you at the 25? You see what I'm saying? So I just want to make sure that we don't, it's not it's not placed somewhere where there's like, it's up for interpretation or there's like an ambiguity of, oh, well, technically it's not 25, it's 35 kind of thing. And then we're having to kind of go back on violations in the future.
So it's been considered as part of our process and part of our strategy, right? So when you look at 37th Street, for example, the posted speed limit at the fixed location is 35 miles an hour. The posted speed limit for most of the corridor is 35 miles an hour. There's a section west of the traffic circle where it is 45 and it reduces to 35 and reversed when you're coming eastbound. So it's 35 and it moves to 45. We probably won't have many issues when it's 35 moving to 45 because you're going to be within the appropriate zone. But when it reduces...
That's the permanent one, so I don't really, it's not going to be moved. It's just that...
The permanent one, there'll be no issues. No issues whatsoever. I am required by statute to put the sign within 300 feet of the actual read of the speed, right? So the temporary sign, whenever we're moving the trailer, has to be within 300 feet of... has to be at 300 feet of the read sign of the actual trailer. So we'll post those according to the statute. There are very few locations in the city where we have speed variances on our roadways. 42nd Street, 35th in both directions, the entire length of that segment. 11th Street, 11th Avenue, 30 miles an hour, the entire length of the segment. School zone will be reduced, so if we're using it in the school zone, there are flashers and it would be within the zone and those flashers are activated. We could use that appropriately there. When you get out west of the traffic circle, there's some area there where we're going to have to be cautious about how we move the trailer and make sure it's within proximity to the right signage, right? And then on 37th, there's an area where it reduces from 35 to 30 west to east to 23rd, right? So we will, we have already made sure that the signs are posted well within those areas. So as long as we're within that speed zone, we won't run into the circumstance where we're citing for a speed that's not properly posted. And we'll try to put a speed limit sign with our warning sign that the camera is ahead as well.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
So, not required by statute, but that's part of our planning. So right now, it's minimal number of locations, and when we do move to our other streets, it's actually just those two locations right now. All of our other locations, when we do identify them, if we do identify them, there are no changes in speed limits.
And granted, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but on topic, that 145, we might as well just change it to 35 and just keep that whole road, because it's like 35 and then 45 and then 35 again. But anyway, I digress.
That's out west, yeah.
Yes, it's out west.
Because of the school, it starts to bring it back down to 35.
It's like, might as well just keep it all, take that 45 out. It's just random, 35 and then 45 and then 35 again. Anyway, my thoughts.
Well, we will be working to alleviate that concern where it exists, but it's minor.
I appreciate that, because as we have seen our, neighbors, they have gone through these kind of
Sure.
issues. So I just want to make sure we're on top of it. And luckily we have someone, that data, based off what they've gone through. So we don't do that. Thank you. I appreciate you, Chief.
Councilmember Delaney?
Yeah, Chief, I just wanted to touch base on one thing you brought up. You said if we have our mobile unit out there and we start getting data and it warrants a permanent AVIS, that would require you coming back to us or to a future council. Am I correct about that?
Correct. Yes, it would. I wouldn't need to do a corridor again because it's already established,
Right.
but I would come back because it would require changing the original contract we have with Census Gatso. And just for transparency purposes, I would bring that back to you as well.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Chief. Appreciate the update, everything. So good discussion, and we'll look forward to seeing that on our next agenda. All right. Real quick, before we take a quick break, Cody has a quick update for us from our discussion on the supplies and services capital.
So the 81,000 for city council is comprised of Heritage Day for 75,000 and then council supplies for 6,600. So that 75 and 6,600 is where the 81.6 comes from. 75 for city council, or I'm sorry, 75 for Heritage Day, and then the balance is the supplies.
I appreciate you. Also consider the increases, because that's probably going to look different for 2027. FYI.
Yeah, so the benefits and the salary for council's on a different line item. It's not included in that 81.6.
Awesome. Great.